ኤፍኤም አፍደገ ዘመናዊ ትግራይ
Yeah. So, I mean, we thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to talk about, you know, the Edo situation and the situation of the minorities, the Tigrayan minorities within Tigray. And we always, you know, we always are always thankful for the opportunity because it needs so much more work still today. And so, yes, thank you for the platform. And sadly, you know, we're now at the 5 year. We did this for the 4 year, and the situation hasn't really changed very much. And, you know, we hope that, you know, as the years go by, we would have, you know, some advancements and there would be, you know, a further implementation of the Pretoria Agreement, and less land would be occupied. But that just has not been the case. And ethnic cleansing in Irob, and in you know, other occupied areas in Tigray is still occurring. And this isn't just, you know, about removing people from the land, it's changing the identities of the people who remain on that land. Whether that's, you know, teaching an Eritrean curriculum to kids in schools or handing out Eritrean IDs. They're really, you know, trying to change the identities of people through different mechanisms that they have. And those who aren't living in occupied areas are still living in this no, you know, no war, no peace situation where there's always a chance that Eritrean soldiers and armed forces can come and can, you know, cause violence. Um, there have been some changes, and I'll let Rita talk about some of the more recent developments. But for all intents and purposes, we really are kind of in the same scenario where we were last year.
Yeah. We were producing the transcriptions from the webinar that we did the last year, exactly a year ago. And with all the different representations that we looked at. So there was things from the Education Bureau, things said about sexual violence, um, across the board, about the heritage items and general justice and accountability. And reviewing it, almost absolutely nothing has really changed. We know that there was some developments in terms of one road being open between Adgrat and Irob. I can see Alam Hagos on the call, and maybe he can tell us a bit more about that, since he's from that specific region. But we have seen kind of a relaxing of that border to some extent, but still a significant number of displaced people still have an incredible amount of fear to go back to these regions. We have seen, like, about a month ago, we went to Zalambesa to see how things were going with respect to these new developments. And I can tell you from what I saw that the houses in Zalambesa still had no roofs. There was no phone line. So, like, you can't make a call from Zalambesa, at least from everywhere. They have to find very specific points where they can make calls to the rest of the region. There was no water access. Water is still being provided by places from Adgrat, where they're carrying a significant amount of water to try to give the residents of Zalambasa some relief. There's no electricity. And there's one healthcare center there's an attempt to rehabilitate it by UNICEF at the moment. So even with, slight developments in this sense, people are still unable to go back where they have no roofs over their heads or any basic basic services. They are also not guaranteed safety because there aren't any security forces present in these areas close to the border. And so that also means that there is still human rights violations like abductions and conflict-related sexual violence and so on. I'm speaking in terms of Irob, Glomkhada, and Zalambesa at the moment. Of course, that is still the case for Western Tigray too, where people are living in apartheid conditions, where there are still people arriving into Shira and Shararo, having faced torture in Western Tigray, being forced to marry and have children with people from a different ethnicity in order to complete this ethnic cleansing agenda. So it's still the same across the board. And not only that, there are fears of a potential renewed conflict that is extremely frightening. Any person that has the opportunity to leave Tigray permanently makes that decision. There are very few that would want to stay and see it through because of this imminent threat. I'll stop there. Aminet, I don't know if you want to ask any questions.
Yeah. I think we can also add, right, when as they're not trying to, as they're not able to go home, they're still in IDP camps, and the situation in the IDP camps is quite dire and still remains dire. And because of the implications and the consequences of the global, situation in terms of aid, with the US change in US and EU funding, we're really in a situation where even beforehand, right, there were IDPs who weren't receiving aid for months at a time or who receive aid only, a few times in the last several years. And there's so many restrictions and kind of barriers in IDPs receiving aid that exist today, the little aid that there is. So a lot of these IDPs still remain in really dire conditions in the camps, and a lot of them are also survivors of sexual violence, of conflict and related sexual violence, and some of them also sexual and gender-based violence that's happening within Tigray. And so without any change in being able to go back, they're still stuck in these really difficult conditions. And so I think that is really challenging. And as Rita said, that has led a lot many people to try to leave Tigray. And most of Europe's population is already displaced. And for a population that's indigenous to its land, the land really is the connector, as is, throughout Tigray, but especially for Europe as the indigenous minority that it is. So yeah, it's still quite dire, unfortunately.
Yeah. To add to that, maybe what the one last point in terms of education. It is sad, or it's being reported at least now. There is supposed to be some form of resumption of education services in Irob. However, there are no resources for the students to actually go to school and carry out their education. They don't have books. The schools themselves are not properly rehabilitated, and so on. It may be, I mean, there are factors that mean that we fear investing in rehabilitating these areas for fear of renewed conflict again. But it's also really important that we don't forget the realities of the individual students in Irob, and potentially yeah, support them if possible by fundraising for books and providing pens and small things like this that can make a big difference in those individuals' lives. We are trying to do that currently as Irob Anina. We're trying to initiate that, I guess, fundraiser. So if anybody wants to support in that sense as well, just a final call for action, please get in touch. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, and I guess another thing that we're trying to do is, as I was saying, like as we're disconnected from the land, finding other ways to survive as a group is really important. And I think one thing that we're trying to focus on is language and culture, and language being like trying to start oral history projects to be able to make sure the language survives, because once the language stops being used, that's a secondary blow to staying a unit and a group and maintaining that identity. So we're finding different ways as an organization to try to make sure that the cultural integrity and an identity of beyond the current predicament that we're in, and that we have been since the 1998 to 2000 border war. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you, Rita and Sarah. So my question is, so do you guys know how many in number are in camps? And then do you guys know like which camps are residing specifically the Europe? And if you have any number for Kunamasu, do we have any number for them? And I understand the situation of, who are living in IDPs, but do we know the number? And I know they're displaced to Eritrea or, has been in hostage. But I hope we know where they are, and then tracing them off is better. So do you guys know anything? Before you answer my question, I think they can hear Tigrinya. So you can ask them in Tigrinya and they will respond in English. And they're really perfect. They just don't want to talk in presentation. So if you have any question, you can raise your hand.
James has no question, I think.
Yes, so I can give it to James. Welcome, Mr. James. He is our partner in organizing this. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, great event or sort of chat here. I've got a few questions. It's great to see Rita and Sarah, by the way. Just hello. So obviously this week there's an event in the Tigray APBG in the UK Parliament. We had, with the Alliance for the Prevention of Atrocity Crimes, we had a meeting with a few of our UK Tigrayan groups, and they're obviously petrified about the idea of the return to conflict and sort of renewed violence and where we can go from there. I've been trying to sort of put my thoughts together in terms of how we can continue to take this advocacy forward and continue to put pressure both on Ethiopia, but also Eritrea and also other sort of the African Union, etc. But I wondered if you had any insight into things that I could ask practically for those on the ground, for Irob on the ground, for other Tigrayans on the ground, that we can ask of parliamentarians next week.
Thank you, Mr. James. Anybody? I don't see hand raised.
I know it's Lloyd. I know it's
Okay, I couldn't see you. Okay, go ahead, Mos.
Okay, I know quite a good. أنا حافظ عن بس أو insecurity سمعهم ده يو شعبية وإرتراء وتعدد كتوصل تقولهم كتوصل حافظ عن بس أو كوابي هذول كتوصل تقولهم جنس فون النبات حيسكم كتوصل تقولهم زبل سلز نبرة يزيون more insecure نفترة بعد anytime ما يسوم خيدو تلاقيه تجي فون سه وكبت سريجنيرو سلام بس أخذوا بس السنة يفرحون ولا دحاني مثل انتهالوا ناو خدودين አይስማሙም ኣብዚ ኾነ እዋን ዝኾነ ነገር ክፍጠር ይዝብል ኢንሴኩሪቲ ስለስምዖም ክብል ሞ ከምዚ ዝመስል ፍርሒ ኣለዎ ምክንያቱም ኮንትሮል ኣለዎ ኮንትሮል توصل تقول لكم جن زي جن إرتراء وبقى تكون النبرة جن حسكم توصل تقول جن جاءهم كسمرنا بآخر.
Thank you, Mos.
Yeah, Laka, before we speak, Alam had a question as well. Alam Hagos. حزي يسمع له.
اوكي سبو يا ودني اللي ريتا ريكي سبو قاطعمي تزارو كي ون ثانك يو بتقدرني غورانا
سبو
حساب بتاعي كمسجن زغبو قاطعم لو معلتي كان بكلهوس ريت زو ميتينغ مهلاي وبتاعي دست حقس كوينا مالتي كاب كبابي يروب ادغرات كبابي انا لازم سريتا مس اسس بروفيسور كحساي حبرنا بزح نسرح منبارنا نفلጥ እዩ ካብቶም ኣካላት ቪክቲም ኣነ ሓደ ባዕለ ኣፍትናትና ከባቢ ክናተይ ስድራ ያው ካብ ሓደ ገዛ ኣብ ምሽተ ዝኣክል ቤተሰብ ተጎድኡኒ እዮም ኣብቲ ዙርያ 25 23 ዝኣክል ከዓ ያው ናትና ቤተሰብ ኣብ ኤክላን ሓደ ቤተሰብ ዝተጎድኡ እዩ ያው ኣብቲ ወሰና ወሰን ብዙሕ መጉዳእትን ችግርን ከም ዘሎ ብዙሕ ግዜ እናሰራሕናሉ መፅና ኢና ከምዚ እኳ ኣጋጣሚ ተሓወስኩን ምስ ኣሕዋተይ ሎም መዓልቲ ግን እዚ ዓመት ድማ ተረሲዑ ዶ ይኸውን ዝብል ብጣዕሚ ሞራሊ ተጎዲአ ነይረ ዓሚ ዘይረሃቦም ኣኒና ምስ ባዓሪታ ኮይኖም ንኸይርሳዕ ኣብ ኢሮብ ወሪዶም ምሳና ዝኽሪ ገይሮም እዮም ማለት እዩ እቶም ጨፍጫፍ ዝበፅሖም እቶም ዝፀነቱ ሕብረተሰብ ንኸይርስዑ ምስ ሕብረተሰብ ኣኪብና ብጣዕሚ ዓብዪ ኣስተዋፅኦ ገይሮም ዓብዪ ሓገዝ ገይሮም ኣኸቢርናዮ ዘኪርናዮም ኢና ማለት እዩ ኣጋጣሚ ብድሕሪ እኳ ተንጠባጠበ ብዙሕ ምስቶም ግሩፕ ናትና ነበሩ ኮሚትመንት ውሕድ ስለዝነበረ ናይ ውሕዳት ሰባት ስለዝነበረ ያው ናይ ውሕድ ኮይኑ ከዓ ይቋራረፅ ይመስለኒ ክንዲት ዝደለ ብዙሕ ፈተና ነይሩ ግን ፅቡቅ ጌርና ፈቲናዮ እናኽበርናዮ ፀኒሕና ዛ ዓመት ደኖ ለዝን ጋፕ ነገር ፈጢሩ ኣሎ ኣነ እውን ዳርጋ ተስፋ ቆሪፀ ድየ ንድዒ ምስ ፖለቲካ ዘሎ ምስ ህዝቢ እኒኦ ናይ ቀርኒ ኣፍሪካ ፅንተታት እውን ንድሕንነት እውን ብጣዕሚ ኣብ ከቢድ ደረጃ ስለ ዘሎ ያው ብከምኡ ዓይነት ንኸይንፍለጥ እውን ዳርጋ እቲ ገዛ ከይዕፀወና ንሕና እውን ከይንኸድ ፈሪሕና ይመስለኒ ድሕር ክንብል ክኢልና ማለት እዩ أجين مستي IDP تلا لو زلهم النات حبرته سب كم يلو نزول كعا بتعبي فما الله أبنا نابنا تابنا يزلهم بس هكذا بتعبي كبيدي زلهم كبيدي وكا كتات تدخل هاجن إحنا نتكا وحش هيكون نزخنا سو كت ألفا كخلي كتزارب أفكار مليا خاي تخلين تات تدخل هاجن بناتنا أكايدا أخو تخدي يوم تبالو جاوانا ጨላንጨል ዲሞክራሲ አለ እንተን ኣሰስ ክትዛረብ ትኽእል ኢኻ ኣብኣቶም ግን ናይ ምዝራብ መሰልካ ቁጡብ እዩ ብጣዕሚ ቁጡብ እዩ ማይ ኣክሰስ የብሎም መሰረተ ልምዓት የብሎም መብራህቲ ዝበሃል የብሎም ኣሕዋተይ ቤተሰብ ኣለዉ ብቐረባ ዘካታተ ርክብ ዝገብረሎም ናይ መብራህቲ ኣክሰስ የለን ውሕስና ጠቕላላ ዝበሃል ኣይስምዖም ንግሆ ይኸዱ ምሸት ይምለሱ ስፔሻል መንእሰይ ተኾይኖም ንጎ ይኸዱ ምሸት ይምለሱ ከምኡ ኢሉ ኣብ ናትና ኢሮብ ከባቢ ዘሎ ከዓ ፖለቲካዊ ምክሰብ ሓደ ሓደ ሰባት ዝብልዎ ብዙሕ ነገር ኣሎ ኣፍና መዲና ይንዛረብን ከምቲ ዝብለኩም ዘሎ ስጋት ስለ ዘለና ፅዕንቶ ስለ ዘሎ ግን በቃ እቲ ሕብረተሰብ እዙይ ዝበሃል ውሕስና ዝበሃል የብሉን መሰረተ ልምዓት ጠቕላላ ቀድም እውን ብውሕድ ነይሩ ግን እቲ ዝነበረ እውን ጭራሽ ናብኡ ኣይነበረን ትራንስፖርት የለን ትምህርቲ ቤት የለን ብላክቦርድ ኣብ እግሪ ኦም እዩ ገይሮም ዝመሃር ተምሃሮ ማለት እዩ ኣብ እግሪ ዓበይቲ ኦማት እናርኣዩ ሓደ ርእሰ መምህርስ ስራሕ ክጅመር እዩ ኪድ ተባሂሉ ከይድስ እንታይ ኣምፅኡካ ነብስኻ ከይትባላሾ ቀልጢፍካ እታ ዝመፃእካያ ተመለስ ካብኣ ብላዕሊ እንተኺልካ ግን ያው ናይ ድሕንነትካ ከቢድ እዩ ተባሂሉ ያው ብከቢድ ደረጃ ካብቲ ከባቢ ከም ዝወፀ እዩ ስለዚ ኣብቲ ወሰን ዘሎ ሕጂ ነቲ ፖለቲካዊ ምክሰብ ሓደ ሓደ ይጥቀምሉ ክኾኑ ይኽእሉ ግን ጠቕላላ እዚ ዝበሃል ውሕስና ዘሎ የብሉ ውሕስና ዝበሃል ምንም ነገር የብሉ ሓደ ሓደ እውን ካብቶም ቅድም ፆታዊ ዓመፅ በፂሕና ዝብላ ደቂ ኣንስትዮታት ናብቲ ከባቢ ከይደን ብጣዕሚ ብዙሕ መግረፍቲ ከም ዝረኸባ እያ ሓበሬታ ረኺበ ንምንታይ ይኽእል ንሕና እዚ ስምና ተባላሽያና ነይሩ ግን ሕጂ ደኣ እንታ ክትገብራ መፂኽን ተባሂለን ብዙሕ መግረፍትን ስጋብ ንየው ዓዲ ረየህን ሰንኣፈን ከም ዝወሰድዎን ዳሃይል ዘየለዋ እውን ኣለዋ ዝብል ሓበሬታታት ይበፅኽ ማለት እዩ ከምዚ ኢሉ እቲ ሕብረተሰብ ያው ኣብ ከቢድ እዩ ዘሎ ኣይደኖ ማእዝዩ ዝሐሸ ንፋስ ረክብ ዝብል ስቅቕታን ኣሎ ሕጂ ኸ እንታይ ድሕንነት ኣለዎ ጥራሕ ናብኡ ምእታይ ዘይኮነስ ዋላ ሰሙ ዘይኮነስ ንእሽተይ ኣብቲ ከተማ ናብዚ ወገን ምእኽል እዩ ዘለዉ ዳርጋ በቃ ስነ ኣእምሮኣዊ ትሮማ ኣለዎ ዓብዪ ትሮማ ኣለዎ በቃ ዝኾነ ጀሪካ እንዲ መገለል ገልጠም ኣብ ዝበለ ማዕፆ ገልጠም ኣብ ዝበለ ተጎዲኡ በቃ ተጀሚሩ መፂሙና ወሰዱና ቀተሉና ዝብል ኣእምሩ ብጣዕሚ ተረቢሽ እዩ ዘሎ ማለት እዩ ከምዚ ኢሉ ስጋብ ማእዝዩ ኣደኖ ደጊም ክንደይ ዓመት 5 ዓመት ሙሉእ ኣብ ስቃይ ኣሎ ካብ ቴስዓ ጀሚሩ እኳ ዝነበረ ተኾይነ ግን ኣብቲ ሕዚ ዘሎ ሲቹዌሽን ብጣዕሚ ከቢድ ብጣዕሚ ሕብረተሰብ ብጣዕሚ ይከብድ ዘሎ ኣብ ኣይዲፒ ውሽጢ ዘለው ኣብ ዓዲግራት ከባቢ ከመይ ዝነብርሉ ዘለው ኬንዳታት ትሪኡ ነይርኩም ኣነ ብቀረባ ስለ ዝፈልጦ እየ ምስኦም ስለ ዝውዕል ብጣዕሚ መሕዘኒ ብጣዕሚ ፀሓይ የይሕዝን ማይ የይሕዝን ብታሕቲ ጭቃ እዩ ብላዕሊ ማይ እናነጠበ እዩ ኣብ ርእሱ ጢመት ሕፅረት ምግብታት ኣሎ ብጣዕሚ ከቢድ በቃ ሰብ ምዃንካ ትፀለሉ ደረጃ እዩ ዘሎ እዚ ክንብል ከለና ግን ያው ዳርጋ ሓቢእኻ ወይ ንባዕልና ኣርሐ ቀቢልና ነበር ከም ትቅድም ናብ መድረክ ወፂና ንሰርሖ ነበርና ስራሕቲ ያው ኢዶም ወጥ የብልልና ስለ ዘለው ከይንፍለጥ እውን ዳርጋ ንሕበሉ ዓይነት ደረጃ እዩ ዘሎ ክብል ደልየ ዝኽሪ ብምግባርኩም ግን ናይ ብሃቂ ብጣዕሚ ፍሉይ ፍናን ፍሉይ ደስታ የተሰምዑን ተረሲዖም ምክንያቱ ፖለቲካ ብመንግስቲ ተረሲዖም እንዲዮም ስሞም ዘልዕል የለን ኣጋጣሚ ሓደ ግዜ ንፖለቲካዊ መክሰብ እምበር ዓሚ ዝኽርን ክንከብር ከለና ሪታ ኣይ ነገር ክሆን ብኸለ ፍፃመ ዘይሲ ብኸለ ተፈፂሙ ከይትብል ተባሂለ ብጣዕሚ ዓብይ ፅዕንቶ ነይሩኒ ብጣዕሚ የሳቀ ነይረ ፅዕንቶ ዓብይ ካብ ናይ ባዕለይ ኣባላት ይኹን ካብቶም ዝነበሩ ብኸለ ተፈፂሙ ዝብል ስም ከይተልዕል ዝብል ዓብይ ፅዕንቶ ነይሩኒ ክነግረኩም ማለት እዩ ስለዚ ኣብ እኳ ዝሐሸ እንተነበረ ሕጂ ከዓ ከምኡ ዓይነት ክተልዕል ንእሽተይ መሰከፊ ከቢድ ስለ ዝኾነ ንእሽተይ ተረሲዖም ኣልሞስት ኢልና ነይርና ሕጂ ግን በቃቲ እንተንኣሰብቲ ስነ ሕልና ስነ ልቦና ደቂ መንነትና ህዝብና ብምህላዩ በቃ ኣይተረሳዕናን ግዲ ዘብል ንእሽተይ ተስፋ ይስምዓካ ገለገለ ሰባት ንውልቀ ረብሓኦም ኢኮኖሚካል ዝኾነ ነገር ንክሰርሕሉ ክጥቀሙ ብዙሕ ይርኢ እየ ምስ ብዙሓት እውን ተፈላለና ኣሎ ብከምኡ ዓይነት እዩ ዝኾነ የቀኒልና ኣንውሕየ ይመስለኒ ተበላሽየ እውን ንባዕሎም መስተእኸል ኣብልዎ እሞ የቀኒልና
يغنيلنا ألم يقرتا I think co-hosts مايك نبكنينا I mean co-host نقركنينا presenters نيشي هولد غيرنا يونيناتو مايك handle رحمو عينة انتر كيف تريونا يقرتا for that so you can go ahead Rita and Sarah
Yeah. Okay. يغني لنا ألم and that was a good intervention. Like Alam said, he's part of one of the victim groups. من سنة سرحوا النور نعمي زخر جيرنا نيرنا on the Christmas Day massacre in Europe. And خمت زوالو بزح استغير نجار يلن. ኣብ ቅድሚ ወርሒ ዛላንበሳ ከይደ ከምቲ ዝበልክኹም ብጣዕሚ ከቢድ ኩነታት እዩ ነይሩ። እቶም ተፈናቀልቲ ኣብ ፋፂ ኣብ ዓዲግራት ዝነበሩ ናብ ዛላንበሳ ክምለሱ ብጣዕሚ እዮም ዝተባብዑ። ናብኡ ተመሊሶም ግን ምንም ዋሕስና ምንም ሴኪሪቲ ከምዘይብሎም እዩ ተረዲኡኒ last time that I was there. ናብ ዛላንበሳ ከይድካ ብዓይንኻ ክትሪኦም ትኽእል ኢኻ ናይ ኤርትራ ወታደር and for people who have been fighting against the injustices that Eritrean troops committed ናብኡ ተመሊስካ ረዳእታ ክትወስድ or otherwise ብጣዕሚ ከቢድ እዩ. It's people that, I mean, people often refuse to go in the first place. Refuse ተገይሮም ከዓ there is a risk that they may not receive aid. Abinette, maybe you can clarify in terms of this. Is this being live recorded? Is it on? It's going to be on TPM or كم يخم تكتبلوه disseminate?
Yeah, so we are on live on still website, I mean Facebook, and then the TPM one صباح recorded ኮይኑ أو كغرب.
Okay, so ስጋት ኣሎ እዩ ብዙሕ ስጋት ከምቲ ፀለምቲ ዝተፈጠረ ኣተባቢዖም ንናይ ፀለምቲ residents ደፋፊኦም ክምለሱ ከለው ኣብኡ ሓደጋ በፂሕዎም ብዙሓት and I think it's similar in this case now northeast now ኢሮብ now ዛላንበሳ now ግሎ መኻዳ ተመለሱ ክበሃሉ ከለው ተፈናቀልቲ ከምኡ ዓይነት ስጋት ብዙሕ ኣሎ እዩ so ሓደ ዓብይ ኮል ክህልወና ዝኽእል ከም civil societies it's that if people want to go back voluntarily ብናይ ባዕሎም ውሳነ ናብቲ ዝነበረዎ ዓዲ ክምለሱ እንተደልዮም there should be a guaranteed they should have guarantees of safety and they should be able to return without any fear that they may be killed or their land taken off them or something like that by foreign forces. So the first thing should be that there is a withdrawal of Eritrean forces, particularly from these areas, and then a withdrawal of the different armed forces from Western Tigray in order for people to at least have a semblance of the relative peace that we have had in central Tigray, in Mekelle, Aksum, Adwa, and so on. There was a question by Mu'az on IDPs and how the numbers of people that are in IDP camps and where these people are, specifically on Irob, I think. But from the beginning, I think, the Irob have been advocating, the IDPs in Irob have been advocating for a designated Irob IDP camp, but have been refused on many occasions. So there was never a designated Irob IDP camp. Most, if not all, of the Irob that have been displaced from the occupied territories live with family members or people who can manage them in Adigrat and Mekelle and so on. In Mekelle, there is a very small borrowed building that is still incomplete. That's called Hope IDP Center. Maybe some of you know it. It's the most concentrated number of Irobs that exist in one IDP center. That center is it's extremely difficult to reside in, at least if you've been there for the last 4 years. It's separate, like each section is separated by one sheet of plastic So I would live here with my children, and then there may be 2 brothers that would live next door to me, and the only privacy we have is one sheet of paper, sheet of plastic. And that's the only Irob camp that I know of across Tigray. And in terms of numbers, it's really difficult to identify exactly how many because they're so dispersed and don't have any designated Irob specific areas, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that's clear, Mu'uz.
And
Do
the
you want
last
to add
question.
to it? No?
That's good. But the last question.
Yeah. The last question from James on engagement with Parliament in the House of Commons, I assume. Is that where you're doing the Parliament sessions, James? Oh, he can't. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah, it is.
okay. And are you working in collaboration with the all-party parliamentary group on Tigray?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So in that case, Verena and I have been working together on with different civil society groups from Tigray to develop concrete asks. I
Mhm.
think it's important that we all align on those asks.
Yep.
Predominantly from Tigray, I would say that the FCDO funding, the last round, around 1 million Great British pounds went to an Addis-based group to do peace building related things, and they did not in any way focus on conflict areas, not even Amhara regions, not Oromia or anything else. They focused on women's participation in politics and things that are a bit
I think internet ፀገም እኒኦ ይመስለኒ ክብልኣካ ያው እዚ ካብቱ ዝተባሃለ ብጣዕሚ ንእሽተይ ብጣዕሚ ምንም ክበሃል ለይኽእል ኣማውንት እዩ ኣብ ቲፒኤም ተወሰነት ናይ 6 ደቂቓ ማለት እዩ ሶ ኣይ ኖ ብዙሓትና መብዛሕትእና ካብኡ ልላዕሊ ንዝክር ንኽእል ኢና 00 ቱና ጀኖሳይድ ዝኽሪ ክንገብር ተለና we have to think where it started, when it started. So this all are the reasons መፂኦም ክደፍሩ ክቐትሉ ካብ ዝሓገዞም ሓደ ነገር እዞም ኣብ ባህሊ ኣዝዮም ካብ 5 ሚልዮን 95 ሚልዮን ካብ ልሉ ጀሚሩ ማለት እዩ ሶ ልኡኡ ሪማይንደር ክኾን እዩ ኣምፂናዮ ነና we know መብዛሕትኡኹም ሃርድ ታይም ክህልወኩም ይኽእል እዩ so ከምዚ ዓይነት ነገራት ክነርኢ ተለና if you have a hard time just leave and come back so we should have told this before ባሴባ ኢድ ከውፅእ ክኒኤ
እሺ ኣብነተይ maybe subtitle ተዝግበረሉ just I can also put that if it's
okay great yes yeah, we'll do that for next. It's just this one is for only this time, so we'll do that next time. So we have a lot of documents also. The صحف, the video, التقرصوا مالتيو. So next time we'll do the subtitle, and then we can also categorize it with different categories مالتيو. التفلالي سوات. artistsat ሃይማኖት ቦታት ልበልዎ ማለት እዮም ገርና ነስተኻኽሎ ንኽእል ኢና but this is just a small reminder
TPM ኣፍ ደገ ዘመናዊ ትግራይ